Welcome back to the Center on Buffalo podcast. We're joined by now one of my favorite analysts out there. He was formerly a 12-year NFL quarterback. Everybody knows him now from ESPN, but I originally knew him as a buddy, a former colleague in the league, playing golf tournaments together with the Athletes First crew. So, Dan, welcome to the podcast, brother.
What's up, B? How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Let's start here. Happy birthday. I saw you had a birthday yesterday.
Yeah, 41 years old. You know, it's funny because when's your birthday? Is it in football season?
It's March 18th.
So, like, being an August birthday, for most of my life, I never really celebrated birthday just because, you know, you're in training camp and it's never really a day. So, like, for most of my life, birthday has just been a normal day. And now, removed, I've tried to celebrate a little bit, even though it feels weird to me. But this past weekend, you know, we had these big plans of like Saturday night, we were going to go out on a boat as a family and spend time together. And then Sunday, we're going to go to the beach and have a kind of like birthday celebration. Dude, with the weather here in Connecticut this weekend was awful. And so like it was a day of just kind of hanging out at the house with the family, which is amazing, but not like the birthday celebration in expectation. So
that's probably a nice, you know, like kind of little downtime before you get going. I had it on ESPN in the background this morning, saw you all over ESPN. So the grind is beginning. So you get to spend some time with the family and just chill out before it gets going. All right, let's jump right in. Do you get tired of constantly having to defend Josh Allen in front of your colleagues?
Absolutely not. Well, because I love to argue and I don't get to argue that much at home with my wife. So like it gives me my release and out of arguing. And then two, you know, one of the things that I think it was that I was when it came to TV was it was such a big deal to me that people understood there was other great quarterbacks in the NFL outside of Tom Brady. This was at that time. And I wanted people to know that. And there were other great coaches out there other than Bill Belichick. And I wanted people to know that. And we are in that world a little bit with Josh, where if you're not Patrick Mahomes, you stink, you know? And so I love getting people to just understand how like special talents and in many of the things or performances that these guys are capable of doing. It does frustrate me a little bit that people nitpick certain elements and they think that's the focus point or that's the 90% when it's the 10%. We do live in a world where, you know, some of the conversations, you can create them as much as you want and the numbers can back up it basically if you're smart enough, you can get a number to say anything you want it to essentially. So I do get frustrated at that at times, yes, but I'm such a fan of Josh's and I'm one of those guys, you know, when Josh was coming out of school, I was relatively critical of him and he's actually confronted me about it. And so I was critical of him and I love, you know, that he's kind of proved it wrong type of thing. And so I'm a huge fan of his as a player and a person. And I think his play speaks for itself in many times.
Well, one of the big common narratives is that he has a turnover issue. Do you believe that Josh has a turnover issue?
I think turnovers are attached to Josh's game. Issue means there's a negative, connotation to it. Josh is going to turn the football over, yes, because one, he's an ultra aggressive athlete. Two, he's unbelievably physically talented, so he's constantly going to try to make difficult throws or difficult plays. And three, when you're a high-level talent, the ball is going to be in harm's way more often than it is if you're not a high-level talent. Like a player that is a similar player, you know, I'll use the comparison of like a Bo Nix right now. Bo Nix is doing a really good job of like making sure he's valuing the ball, but he's not this physically unbelievable jaw-dropping play. And I think Josh is actually a player that has kind of found the sweet spot of still being able to be that rare talent that can make plays and or throws that others can't, while also living in that world of valuing the ball and making the really proper decision on a consistent basis. So yes, there are turnovers attached to his game. I have always said this about turnovers, and I learned this while I was in the NFL and a little bit under Gary Kubiak. It's not the turnovers that matter. It's where the turnover happens and then what's the subsequent impact of that turnover.
Yes.
You know, if I as a quarterback account for 50 touchdowns and I account for 7 touchdowns or 15 touchdowns for the other team because of my turnovers, we're plus 35 on touchdowns because of just those turnovers. You know, and so I think people lose context of that. So turnovers are there. I just don't believe that they're an issue that is negatively hampering his performance or the team's.
I'm with you. And not all turnovers are created equal. A 3rd and 14 where he gives a guy a chance down the field and he gets picked off. Josh has that in his game. He does not care. He's talked about it. He does not care about the stats. He doesn't care about the criticism. He's going to give his guys a shot down the field. And it's not always going to be, pretty at times, but he
Sure,
truly doesn't care. And I love that about him. But there's also times where, yeah, there's the Monday Night Football game last year against the Jets, and they
totally.
were an issue there, and they lost because of those turnovers. So I'm with you there 100%. When you look at this offseason and what the Bills did, they trade Diggs, got rid of Gabe Davis walks. They bring in Curtis Samuel. They draft Keon Coleman. Do you think they've surrounded Josh with enough talent at the skill positions?
Yeah, I really do. And it's an evolution that we've seen Patrick Mahomes go through, and I liken it to like can Josh play LeBron James style in many ways, like this power point guard, because there are times where you want a quarterback to play point guard in the NFL and this ball distributor where it's just catch and throw and you're trying to find that easy completion and get the ball out of your hands. And there's guys that have to play that style. Brock Purdy's probably one of the best. Tua is one of the best at that as well. And that's their superpower. But you also don't want to make him physically something that he's less than. And so I think that, with the people that they have around Josh, they're trying, and Patrick again went through this where, okay, Tyreek is gone, but we're going to get all these different pieces and they're playing certain styles defensively that they're going to not give us the throws down the field as much. And, Patrick really settled into being that power point guard type of player. And, Josh has started that trajectory in his career. And I think, the thing that I love about Buffalo's personnel, and you got to have the right coach to make sure that he utilizes it. It's, if you go back to the 2019 season for LSU and Joe Brady, it was these guys had really specific roles. It was Jamar was going to be that player that was going to win one-on-ones, and Justin was going to be the player that then benefited from him winning those one-on-ones. And then it was Moss at the tight end position that was kind of being that third option that was going to, again, create matchups or benefit off those matchups. And I think it's a little bit like that in Buffalo. You're going to – I'm a huge Keon guy. When I do Saturday ABC college football, Keon was always all over highlights. And, so I think Keon is going to be a big-time focal part of the offense, pass game-wise. And then MVS is a proven player. I've always enjoyed Curtis Samuel, but like the two tight ends, they're going to be – so Joe's going to have this opportunity to create all these different starting point matchups. Hey, this time we're going to start with Dalton on this one-on-one, and if he gets it, let's work him. And if not, let's get the step two of that person, maybe a Shakir type of guy, or hey, this time we want to get Shakir lined up. And I think that's the really interesting, at least my vantage point of their offense, Eric, is like, it's not, some offenses are always starting with that same one person. And I love that. I think that they are going to be able to start with a different singular person on each end or every given play. And I think, the intriguing part is they have that. And I think also the challenging part is how much Josh is capable of just kind of doing all of that might somewhat be very mundane and boring.
I'm with you. And look, at times it's incredible to have a number one receiver that you can go to and in any specific situation, but then defensive coordinators know that as well. Defensive coordinators know that when you have a number one receiver that you need to get the ball to early to get him his touches, to keep him in the game, they can key in on that as well. And so at
Yep,
times, yeah, you got to have the guys that can make plays in general, but I feel like they have enough guys that can do it.
I
And
agree.
I'm with you 100% there. The Bills lose Milano. We're not sure if it's for the season or what the time frame specifically is going to be. But do you have concerns about this Bills defense heading into the season?
I do post Milano injury. I think it would be disrespectful to some of those guys to not feel that way. I don't want to say the world is ending, and I don't want to say that this team can't once again be one of the best teams in the AFC. But Micah and Jordan were, a really special tandem, both individually, like really high end players. And then when you put them together, you can make the case that they were the best safety duo in football. And so I don't want to be disrespectful to those guys and say, no, they'll be fine. And I think Rap good player, and Cole Bishop. I've called a couple of his games at Utah, their draft picks. So like you're definitely sitting there going, okay, I think they'll be okay, and Sean, when, McDermott took over some of that defensive play calling, you saw a lot of different changes and a lot of, much more movement and confusion created. So how well they can grasp that is going to be a big part of it. Ed played so well last year. Rousseau looks to be taking a step forward. So you're still encouraged by obviously the Rizul addition last year. So I still think it'll be a good unit, but to pretend that the loss of really those three guys, um, doesn't give you some pause or some, hesitation, I think is disrespectful to the types of players that they are. So again, not the end of the world, but there is some, I want to see how this group comes together as the course of the season goes on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been covering the Bills in this role for what 6, 7 years now, and this is the first time that there's been a bunch of turnover on that side of the ball. You're always heading into the season saying, okay, well, the back end of the defense has Trey, Poyer, Hyde. You can kind of cover up whoever that next cornerback's going to be. They got Taron Johnson, the nickel, one of my favorite guys
So
to cover.
good.
I mean, they were
Yep.
just so consistent. You knew what you're getting year in and year out. And this year, for the first time, there is concerns. Can this be a great unit? Absolutely. But they're going to need guys. They're going to need Von Miller to get back to some sort of form, close to what he was prior to the ACL. Greg Rousseau is going to have to take that next step, and guys are going to have to step up and make those career development steps that they need to take this year. So when you look at this Bills team, obviously everybody's chasing the Chiefs. They've been close many times in the playoffs. For them to get over that hump and make it to the Super Bowl, what do you think the Bills will need to do to be able to get over it?
I mean, people don't like this answer, Eric, but like sometimes it's like everyone else has got to do their part in some critical moments as well, and
Right.
that's just me being very bluntly and honest. So I think I'll start offensively. A lot of it is going to come down to how Joe's vision for this offense is going to play itself out. And I think the biggest question mark for the offense is going to be, can Keon win one-on-one versus man coverage in the NFL? Because I do think that they'll consistently see a lot of zone coverage and they'll see a lot of shell. And, Josh, uh, more often than not, has shown the ability to play that boring brand and get those completions and, see where the matchup is. So, when teams are going to, eventually teams are going to go, well, no, okay, like this isn't working. Maybe we will play a little bit more man coverage. It happened a little bit to the Chiefs last year because they didn't have someone that was going to be like really do it. So like how good Keon gets in that, I think is going to be a huge conversation. Obviously, Josh and that consistency of his level of play with some of the boring stuff, how much they're going to use him in those designed quarterback runs. Where's the perfect marriage? Is it situationally in a game? Is it as the season goes on that we saw a little bit last year? How dominant can that offensive line be with James? James, I think, averaged over 100 yards from scrimmage per game ever since Joe Brady took over last year. So, just really being more of that completely balanced team, both, schematically and personnel wise,
Mm-hmm.
so I think but I have a lot of faith in that. I really do. I say that they're question marks, but they're not doubted to me. And then, yeah, I think, defensively, it's how good the back end plays, and how good that back end, because, again, once Sean took over, the big thing for me was how, and I've always said this, I think some of the most challenging defenses for a quarterback is when you force us to be like this. Like, I don't know what you're in. Like
Right.
I it might be two and it might be four, but that changes what I do. And if you could just get that fraction of a second, like that fraction of a second, it changes everything. So I think how well they can play on the back end in those games that, more than likely you're seeing the Kansas City, you're seeing Houston, you're seeing Cincinnati. I think is going to go a long way.
Let's take a moment now to hear from a couple of our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Dano's Seasoning, best seasoning in the game. Where we're going to get Dan Orlovsky hooked up right. We're going to change the game for him. He gets made fun of for eating plain grilled chicken. We're going to give him that all natural, no sugar seasoning. Get that chicken breast right. Go out and get you some today. This episode's also brought to you by Prime. Go out and check out their great collaborations they got going right now. My personal favorite, the ice pop. You got to check this one out. This one is as good as it gets. All right, let's get back to the episode. Who in the AFC, let's say besides the Bills, do you think has a chance to knock off the Chiefs this year?
I don't think it's an individual team. I think there's 4 or 5 teams. You know, like we always get asked that on TV, like who's the team? I'm like, guys, we can't sit here and rave about the AFC and rave about the AFC quarterbacks and then give you one team. So
Right.
I still think Buffalo is in that conversation. I think the Jets, if they're healthy, absolutely are built because of that 4-man rush and, you know, Aaron. Houston, just because the acquisition of all the talent that they have and CJ being such an unbelievably gifted talent. Cincinnati, I always say Joe's the one guy that the Chiefs, at least defensively, don't want to see. And I think it's the best offensive line that Joe has had. So he's got to stay healthy. So I really believe it's that group of 5 teams that are most equipped. People are going to say, well, what about Baltimore? Baltimore lost some people as well. So I want to see how that offensive line looks. I want to see how Zach Gore, their new defensive coordinator, uses some of those pieces. Patrick Queen not there. So but I still have a ton of belief in them. Miami's got to get healthy, specifically on defense. So you've got to kind of see how that picture plays itself out. But I think that there's that group of like 4 or 5 teams that are most equipped.
Are you concerned with Joe Burrow's durability?
Yes, and I love Joe. You know, I've kind of said like the challenge for Joe is not becoming Andrew Luck, who is, you know, one of my favorite young players to watch. And you marveled at how great he was. And then you appreciated it, and you can maybe speak to it better as an offensive lineman, but like how tough he was. And like he would hang in there and hang in there and hang in there. And there's the admiration towards that, but then there's also like stop. Because, right. It's the negative impact it's having on you. And so, yeah, I have there's a, pit in my stomach about it of like, because I love Joe. I think he's one of those top 3, top 4 guys unquestionably. And Cincinnati is, one of the most exciting teams to watch when Joe's healthy. So, yeah, there's a concern to it.
Do you think Aaron Rodgers regains his form post Achilles? You know, he's getting what you guys are the same age, correct?
Yeah, we went into the league the same year. So
yeah,
yep.
Yeah. Are you concerned with someone your same age coming back off an Achilles?
Yeah, someone, yes. I mean, I did the Peloton this morning and I got off like, oh my gosh. But I've learned a little bit of this just from you don't doubt greatness, man. Like you just don't. I've watched it with Tom. I've watched it with Tiger Woods. Like, and Aaron is an all-time great, and so I don't doubt him. And so I think Aaron's going to look a lot like he did in those MVP seasons on the back end of his career. I'm not saying he's going to win MVP, and I don't think he's going to have to, but I think that we're going to see the Aaron Rodgers that, many of us know and remember as, hey, this dude's going to be good for 4,000 yards and 30 plus touchdowns.
Everyone wants to crown San Francisco already in the NFC. Is there anyone else that you're saying, okay, this is the team that can take them to the wires at Detroit, or are there others that you're keying on out of the NFC?
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, Detroit is right there. I remain adamant. Detroit gave that game away. That San Francisco didn't win it. They made some plays. I don't want to. And also, like, San Francisco got 2 huge question marks right now. Not question marks, huge question marks with Ayuk and Trent. So we'll see what happens with it. But Detroit, I think they're going to still have one of the best offensive lines in football, and Jameson Williams having a full offseason as a speedster is a big deal. Jahmyr Gibbs getting healthy, after training camp. I think their defensive line got shored up with Reeder and Terry Arnold on their back end. So, like, absolute Detroit. Green Bay is going to be fantastic as well. I think the Rams offensive line is going to be arguably the best run blocking offensive line in ball. And so if you block for Stafford with those 2 guys, so I think the Rams are going to be really high end. I think the 2 sneaky teams for me, Philadelphia will be very good as well. I think the 2 sneaky teams in the NFC would be Seattle. I just believe, Mike McDonald, I think, is a phenomenal head coach, and I love their offensive coordinator who came over from UW. And so I think Seattle's got a chance to be a 10-win football team, and also Atlanta. I think Atlanta has such young talent with the addition of Judon Simmons on the back end or the backside of their defense. I think Atlanta's got a really good chance to be a very good football team.
Yeah, I like that list a lot. All right. Caleb Williams looked great against the Bills. Very basic game plan, played against mainly backups against the Bills. Looks really good against Cincinnati. Are you on the Caleb Williams hype train?
And I've always been a fan of Caleb's ever since I saw him, high school be a QB collective talent. And I just watched him throw. I'm a big believer in like a natural thrower of the football. And so, like, listen, in this past weekend's game, I thought he was fine until the very end of the second quarter, and then you're like, "Yup, that dude looks different." And so there's the flashes are there. Can he sustain some of his play? I think is going to be the big challenge. How much is he actually capable of getting away with when the real bullets start flying in the regular season? You know that, and so because again, he's a remarkable talent, and if you're the Bears, you're unbelievably excited both as an organization and a fan base with some of the stuff you've seen. Eric, I've seen two guys play this style of football in the NFL consistently and be good. One is the guy that's at the quarterback of Buffalo, and one is the guy that I am not going to mention his name is in comparison to Patrick. Josh is 6'5", 250.
Right.
Caleb's not, and so like I want to see how much of this play, because it looks like he's playing college football again. And it's against the backup. So it's like, how much is he going to be able to do that against starting defenses? But I think he's got a chance to be the best quarterback that they've had ever, for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch you play out. Dan, I tell you all the time, I think you're the best in the business at what you do. I always appreciate your takes, your preparation, and all that you bring to it. I know this is an extremely busy time for you, so I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. You're the man, brother.
I always appreciate you, bud, and thank you for the kind words anytime. I appreciate you, bud.